I lost complete interest in being creative, in fact, interest in anything at all. And so I needed something to help me to kickstart the creative thing, because it helps with our mental well-being. And this project is not only for people who've had COVID like me, but for other people, you know, friends and family, and people like artists that are taking part in the project where it's restricted some of their how they can do their work, how they can perform. They could, you know, they couldn't go out to perform like they normally do. So I wanted to do something to help people and also help COVID sufferers like myself. So there's going to be, I think that we've got about 9 workshops, haven't we, Anne-Marie, for this project between now and February, March, yeah. So can I ask if everyone can put themselves on mute, if that would be okay, so it's not a distraction for Suzanne, please.
Oh, I've got a message off somebody to say it's Christine. She can't get in. Will you let her in, please?
Oh, if I must. There she is.
Don't let her in.
Yes.
Yes, she's coming in. Good. So just to sort of add to what Mandy said as well before we get to Suzanne, this has been funded by the Arts Council, this project. So it's very good that they've recognised the fact that people are having to use new and inventive ways to try and get creative, and they've recognised the fact that some people, even though most of us are sort of out of lockdown, most of us are able to get out and about, but not everybody is, and so it's recognizing that fact as well, so that's really good. So thanks to the Arts Council for this. Mandy, should we put forward to Suzanne and let her get started?
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
then
yeah, so over to you, Suzanne.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Well, yeah, good, because if we can't, I'll have to do puppets or something. Right, so yes, creativity after COVID, how to tell your story. The first thing I want to say about this is that personally, I haven't been affected by the bug, but I know people who have. I know people who've died. I know people who've survived. Mandy, thank goodness you're still here. And it's not gone away yet. This is going to be here for a very, very long time. So this is creativity amidst COVID as well as after COVID. But my favorite thing to do is storytelling, whether that's listening to stories, researching stories, or telling them. Now, telling them on Zoom, I must say, is very different to telling them in front of people. So when I say I'm excited to be here, I'm actually really nervous. So, you know, so yes, so I've chosen one of my favorite stories. It's a grim one, but not too grim. It's one that doesn't really get told often. I've certainly never heard it told, and Disney haven't done a film of it yet. So maybe that's a good thing. So it's called The Three Feathers. Once upon a time, there was a king, and the king had 3 sons. The 2 eldest were arrogant and entitled. The youngest was of a more gentle nature. But the king had decided he was going to choose his heir. And he called his sons to the courtyard and he told them his plan. And he said, I've got these 3 feathers. I'm going to throw them up in the air. You must each follow one. And wherever that feather takes you, I want you to bring back the most beautiful carpet in the world. So he threw them up in the air. One went east, one went west, one fell down to the ground. Well, the 2 eldest brothers, they went east and west. mocking the youngest, who looked at the ground, at his feather. Oh, but he was a gentle soul. And as he looked, he noticed that the feather had landed next to a ring in the floor. His first thought was, it's one of those things you tie the horses to. Oh. But then he moved away the straw and the dust from around it and saw that it was not in the ground, it was in a small door. So he lifted the ring and he turned it and he pulled that door open, and there, leading downwards, was a dark stairway. He went back to the castle, fetched a lantern and went down the stairs. He came to a cavern, and in the dim light of his lantern, he saw a little golden throne. And on that little golden throne was a little green frog with a tiny crown on her head which shone like a star. Hello? How can I help you? I don't get many visitors down here. I'm the Queen of the Frogs. Oh, Your Majesty, I am the son of the king from the land above. I've been sent on a quest, and but I don't think somehow I'll find what I'm looking for down here. But it's very nice to meet you. So, wait a moment. What is it you're looking for? The most beautiful carpet in the world. Oh, she says, let's have a look. And she opened up a little box at the side of the chair. And she rummaged around, and then she pulled from it a tiny little beautiful carpet. There you go, she said. Well, he took it in his hands and thank you. That is indeed beautiful. Thank you so much. Let me know how you get on. I will. And he went up the stairs. And as he got closer to the light, the carpet began to grow and grow in his hands. And eventually, as he just got through the hole, it unraveled itself all over the courtyard. And it was the most beautiful carpet he'd ever seen. There were threads of silver and gold, and it was so finely woven. His two brothers came back with their shabby in comparison carpets. And they were like, what? That's not fair. We demand another challenge. You can't just base this on one challenge, Father. Very well, said the king. I shall throw the feathers again, and this time I want you to bring back the most beautiful ring in the world. So up the feathers went. One went east, one went west, one went down to the earth. The youngest son moved the carpet aside, went back down those stairs. How did you get on with the carpet? Oh, they loved it. They said it was the most beautiful carpet they'd ever seen. But my elder brothers didn't think it was fair that it was just one challenge. Oh, yes. Well, fair enough. What's the challenge this time? I've got to find the most beautiful ring. And the Queen of the Frogs, she lifted that box open, she rummaged around inside it, and she pulled out a ring. Now, the metal was tarnished, the jewel was dull. There you go. Take that. Oh, thank you so much. Let me know how you get on. Oh, I will. And as he went up the stairs, the metal began to gleam, and the jewel in it began to sparkle. By the time he got to the courtyard, it was casting rainbows on the walls. That is indeed a most beautiful ring, said the king. Well, the brothers had come back with shiny imitations, shall we say. That's not fair. Best of three. All right, said the king. There are three brothers after all, and this is a fairy tale. So he said, this time, I want you to bring back the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, the brothers nudged each other. They knew plenty of beautiful women. All they had to do was promise money or jewels, or perhaps even being queen to one of them, and they would come in their numbers. So the king threw up the feathers in the air. One went east, one went west, one went down. And for the first time, the youngest son was like, I really don't think this is going to work this time. But anyway, he pulled that ring, he opened that door, he went down those stairs, And there she was, the queen of the frogs. And she said, how did you get on with the ring? Oh, they loved it, loved it. Is there another challenge? Yes. And she went to look in her book. Well, I just want to say thank you for all your help with the previous tasks, but I really don't think that you're going to be able to help me with this one. What is it? Well, I've got to bring back the most beautiful woman in the world. I see what you mean. Yes, that could be quite a challenge, I suppose, but let's see what we can do. And she looked in her box and she pulled out a carrot. She placed it on the floor and she sat on it. You go up those stairs and we'll see what happens when you get up there. Thank you. No problem. Off you go. And so he went up those stairs and what am I going to do with a frog and a carrot? I mean, this just is not going to work, is it? It's not. So he got up there and there were his brothers surrounded by beautiful women. They'd all come to see which one of them was the most beautiful. It turned into a beauty contest. And when the youngest son appeared, they went, where's your woman then? Have you got one? Don't think you've even got one, have you? Spend all your time reading. He said nothing. But then there was a clatter of hooves on the cobbles, and through the courtyard gate came a carrot-coloured carriage. It stopped in front of them. The door opened and out stepped the most beautiful woman any of them had ever seen. And she had a tiny little crown on her head that shone like a star. But that is where I'm going to leave that story, because there could be many endings here. I mean, you know, the kind of traditional grim ending is that they get married, they live happy ever after, the youngest son becomes king, and everything goes on from there. But what happens to them? Do they have children? Do they have grandchildren? What adventures do they go on? Or do they just decide, you know what, I don't want to be king, and they go and set up a library somewhere so they can read to their heart's content, share knowledge and wisdom, and I volunteer there on Wednesdays. So the main thing is with stories is there really isn't a happy ever after, because that's just that part of the story. A new story will set up. We don't have our lives and then have a happy ever after and everything's perfect. Every day is different, especially with the pandemic and with long COVID. Waking up and not knowing what symptom you're going to have. And so it's not a happy ever after. It's a new story. And to try and help people with long COVID to tell their story, I'm going to have a look at some of the bits in the story. First of all, there's an event that changes things. And for everyone in the pandemic, that event has been COVID, and the lockdowns and the restrictions and the catching and processing and recovering from, thankfully, the disease, or the virus, as we must call it. So that is our life-changing thing, which enables us to go on a quest. Now, when I was looking for stories for this, my first thought was the hero's quest. Fabulous, the hero's quest, because Jack sets out on an adventure and he comes back either with riches or a princess or whatever, but he always comes back to where he started. But he's always had to go through trials or get a certain object or defeat a beast, or, you know, that kind of thing. But then I thought, well, with COVID, we can't go anywhere. Our lives are very, very restricted. So we can't go on an outward quest, but we can perhaps go on a kind of inward quest. I don't mean going into ourselves, you know, perhaps meditating will help, but I'm too busy-minded to meditate. But let's look at what we've got around us. Just as in the story, the youngest son looked down to where his feather landed. He couldn't do anything else, but he saw the opportunities that presented. When we went into lockdown, me and my husband had just been given Arts Council funding, and we were preparing to go around the landscape and look at stuff, but suddenly we couldn't talk to anyone. We couldn't interact. We couldn't even go into the studio and record it. So we had to do it here. So we had to look at what was here. We did actually make it in the end. But it's what is here. We have the internet. Thankfully, we are doing this via Zoom so that anybody in the world can join in with this. Anybody who is missing it today can catch up on it. So this is the one thing we do have at our disposal. We can use this. We can share it. We can come together on this, even though I would much prefer to be in a room with you all, drinking cups of tea and sharing stories and everything that went with the before. So that's one thing that we can use what we've got. And this story is very based on objects. And objects are important. We fill our houses with them. We buy things or we collect things from places we've been. People send us things that mean something. I'm going to show you something that, even though I can't travel at the moment because I'm not going out there, this is something that is very, can you see that? Can I catch the light on it? There we go, it's a bit better. This was from a antique shop in Whitby. There was a whole bucket of them, but I wanted to take one with me because these are snakes, and these are snakes that have been transformed into stone by a Saxon saint. It also reminds me of my time in Whitby when I went to the Abbey and had a look around, you know, and it was beautiful, and up on the headland and everything. And then I was doing some storytelling at the Whitby Folk Week, and the landlord of the pub said, there's a thunderstorm coming in, get to your next venue, shelter. I went up those 99 steps to the Abbey because I wanted to be on that headland in a thunderstorm, because that's the kind of person I am. So I went up there and it was fantastic. And so looking at this reminds me of that energy, that feeling of being up there when the wind was howling and the rain was lashing down. And there are a few of us sheltering in this little archway. And there was a woman from Dudley, and she was saying that her husband was out in the middle of this because he was walking from Robin Hood's Bay to Whitby. And so she was slightly concerned that he was going to be, you know, out in this. So that brings back a nice memory of that week and being in the Abbey and the St. Hild story, which then got me into Saxon saints. And so, yeah, it's a whole keyhole to a whole treasure box of adventures. Another thing that I have been going to see, though it's been quite scary, is this wonderful thing. I haven't got the real thing, but it is a thing of absolute beauty. It's a bit crinkled, this, because I carry it around with me because I love it so much. When in the museum, the Sun Pendant, it is called, is displayed like that, and it was found in somewhere in North Shropshire. They haven't told me yet, and they probably will never tell me, but it's 3,000 years old. It was put into the 3,000 years ago, it was put into the ground. So I want to know the story of this. I want to hold it in my hand and see the way the light shimmers off it and things like that. So objects are important. Imagining objects is also something we can do. For example, when I held up those 3 feathers, can you just put in the chat or something what feathers came to mind? And I'll try and find it. Look around my camera. Hang on. In there. There, right, I can see them. So 3 feathers. Okay, we've got white goose feathers. Cool, yeah. White feathers. Jay, magpie, and crow, yeah. Fabulous. Quite long feathers, maybe a swan or magpie, yes. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, when I hold them up, when I first started telling the story, they were peacock feathers because he was royal. But now when I hold them up, they're barn owl feathers for some reason. I don't know why. It's just, maybe I've been looking at feathers too much over lockdown. White small feathers gently floating. Oh yeah, that's a gorgeous picture, isn't it? Yeah, fabulous. So that's one thing where we all have a different thing. So when you're telling a story, don't describe it too much. Let the story kind of tell itself. You've got, for example, The Hobbit. In The Hobbit, you have the book, and the first paragraph of that, if you take all the adjectives out of it, it goes down to that much writing. It's a beautifully written piece, but it is very, very descriptive because Tolkien is creating that image in your head of the Hobbit hole. Then you see the film, and it's all laid out there for you. And people who have read the book will be looking for the bits that are, you know, illustrated in the book. In the middle, you have storytelling. So if I was to tell you about the Hobbit hole, it would be different to Tolkien's, and yet you wouldn't see it on a screen, you'd see it in your head. So that Hobbit hole in the ground would start to appear in your head. There are some people who can't visualize, and that even some storytellers can't visualize. So they relate it to something they've seen. So if you have never seen a Hobbit hole, then there will be pictures of one that other people's interpretation, and you pick the one you like best. But we're not doing hobbits today, we're doing three feathers. So visualization is kind of, it's not key, but it helps. So if you can do it, or you can relate it to something else while telling your story. The objects in the story, you've got the carpet and the ring and the beautiful maiden. You will all have seen something different with the carpet. Now for me, the carpet, yes, I said it had the silver and gold threads in, but what colour was the carpet to you? Again, put in the chat if you want to. Red carpet. Pinks and blue, oh, that sounds nice. Red, a dark red, intricate pattern, mostly red. That's really interesting. So in my head, it's blue. It's a really dark midnight blue. Straight, it's amazing. Oh, rainbow, of course, yes, we love it. Oh yeah, that'd be beautiful. Yeah. So an Indian carpet, lots of colors. Yes, beautiful. So yes, so that's, everybody sees things differently. And as you're telling your story to somebody else, they will relate it to what they can see. The same as if you're telling people about what you're going through, which will change every day. I mean, some days I'm great. I mean, Tuesday I drove to Nottingham. It was, you know, it was great, but I was a bit scared because I was in a town with lots of people. I drove to see my daughter Abby, to see her new house, and finding the house and coming out, and everywhere was masks again, and I'm completely fine with that. But I was exhausted yesterday. Wednesday, I was exhausted. So even it had an effect on me, because I used to be able to drive for a very long time. Lots of times during the week, I was always in the car, and then COVID happened, and I'm not used to traveling now, so it wears me out. So you could say to people, oh yes, well, I'd love to come, but I might not be able to. And tell them a little bit about, plant little seeds. You don't have to say, well, this, you don't have to go from day one when you caught it, or just put little seeds so that they can build up the story themselves. And hopefully they will understand, because you haven't bombarded them with an epic. You've given them little snippets, which then they've woven together in a way they can understand. I have made notes, so I may be looking down. The characters are defined by their words and actions in this story. The king I see him as an old and wise gentleman with his two arrogant and entitled sons, and then the gentle one. And how you relate to a character gives you either empathy or, well, I don't want them to win. I don't know what the word is for that. But so with the youngest son, because he's gentler and he's not arrogant and entitled, you kind of want him to win. So there's that builds up that empathy with that character. You want him to win, and you want the what is the Queen's backstory? I don't know. What one version I read that she was there with all her daughters and they were all frogs and there was an enchantment. But what is that story? I want to hear that story. How did they get changed into frogs? Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. Anyway, so objects is what we've done. And right. If you are telling a story, I mean, if this is about creativity after COVID, if you want to get into storytelling is something you can do from home. You can work on it from home. The library will have many books, maybe some libraries will even deliver. Or there's audio books if you don't want to read one, or there's this, if you're researching the background of a story. For example, when I was researching St. Milberger's story, for example, there's this place called, I think it's JSTOR, not Jmart, but it's JSTOR, JSTOR, and they had a thing on in lockdown where you could read 100 articles a month, and you couldn't print them off, but you could read them on their site. So I found out loads of stuff about Saxon women and invading geese and things like that for a story I was working on. And I don't think that would have been as accessible if it wasn't for the lockdown. So these are things that have been made available to us. So what is your story called? If you're telling a story, it's easy to give it a very long title, how the world became or something like that. But with the three feathers, you've got three words. So if you are going to tell a story, relate it to what's in the story. Could call it the Frog Queen, we could call it the youngest son, we could call it the old king, but it's called the three feathers in history. So if you're telling your COVID story, give it a name, because if you give something a name, it becomes a thing and then you can build on it. And how do you tell your story? Well, if you're a storyteller, voice obviously is quite important. During the lockdown, my voice practically disappeared because I wasn't using it. But I was doing a workshop years and years ago called How to Tell a Bedtime Story. And there was a lady there who was very interested in telling stories to her granddaughter when she came to stay. And I was, well, really, if you're doing a bedtime story, you need to use quite a nice soft voice, a bit like Brian Cox. And she says, oh, I know exactly what you mean. She says, I went to one of his lectures and his voice was so soothing, I fell asleep. So I'm going to compare the other astronomer and comedian, Dara O'Brien. He's on Mock the Week. And he's written science books and that, but he has this enthusiasm. He has this, let's get it done type of thing. And that's kind of infectious. So I would compare your voices. If you've got an enthusiastic, happy bit, do the Dara O'Brien. And if you're doing the calm, collected bit, do Brian Cox. If you don't want to tell a story, another way of telling your story is by writing. I myself have been doing a nature writing blog because I find nature fascinating and I write about it. So it would be a different session with a writer, but it still gives you a voice. So if you can't speak to people and tell them your story, then write it down, because these COVID stories need collecting, they need remembering, because this is the first time anyone has ever done anything like this, ever experienced anything like that. And every single story is different. There will be a thread that weaves through them, but every story will be different, it will be valid, and we need to hear these stories so that we can understand what it's like, and we can try to help, or at the very least stop ourselves from saying you'll get better, because that's the worst thing anyone can say, I think. So who is your audience? You've got the story in your head. Who is your audience? Are you telling your family how you feel? Are you telling the doctors how you feel, the nurses? Or are you telling the world? Family, I think, is the hardest to tell to. Friends is kind of okay. Doctors, that would be hard too, because they have limited time. But if you're with a therapist or something like that, then really tell them your story, and then make a video of it or something, and share it on YouTube, like Mandy's doing with this project. Tell the world what it's like. And words are very, very important. Words, I love using words. I mean, my camera is supported actually on Shakespeare's complete works, a dictionary and thesaurus, and the Shropshire Word Book, because they're my 3 biggest books. So I am surrounded by words, written, spoken, whispered. Words are amazing. Language is amazing. So use it. Use it. Mold them to your purpose. Speak them and tell them. Because when you tell a story, or when you hear a story, you go on a journey. And this is a sciencey bit. There are many things you can look up online about the science of storytelling. Because when you hear a story, or indeed you tell a story, hormones are released in your brain. There's cortisol. No, is it called? Yeah, it's the stress hormone, because you're like, oh, what's going to happen? Then you've got the reward hormone, dopamine. And then you've got serotonin. Now, when I tell a story, I think I just gush with serotonin, because I'm in my happy place. So I really love doing it. Before a story session such as this, I would get really anxious, and so I already have that stress hormone going on. So when the serotonin comes in, it's bliss. So telling stories is just lovely. Where did I get to? One thing about telling your story and going back to the 3 feathers is look for your helper. Nearby there will be a helper, and then you will know that you're not alone in this. You're not alone on this journey, and this is not just your story. There are other people in it. So hopefully that will help. Helpers will help. That's what they're there for. There are a lot of helpers in story. In the 3 feathers, there's the Queen of the Fox. And the things to finish off about that bit is the things we need are close at hand. So the hero's journey does not always require an outward journey, like I said at the beginning. Look at what is around you. Look at what you can access today, 10 minutes after this is finished. What are you going to Google? Are you going to go make yourself a cup of tea? That would be nice. Get yourself your favorite biscuit. What is around you that makes you feel good, that makes you have those little bits of serotonin, those little bits of dopamine that are really feel-good hormones. They're not going to heal anybody, but for that 5 minutes, they might just help you feel a little bit better. In story, if you want to go off and be a storyteller, I know there are some storytellers here today. Start off by, is there a story or fairy tale that has stayed with you? One that you had as a child, or one that you heard somebody else say, and find as many versions of that tale as you can, and then tell your version of it. You don't have to write it down, make notes, do a storyboard, so that can help. But just try and remember the key bits of it and practice telling it to the fridge or a wall or something on, you know, if say your object on the fireplace, for example, you know, so or I find this chat very helpful. This is my traveling story driving practice. And he's very helpful when I'm practicing stories. But in fact, he gets sick of me telling them. But he's very helpful. What in the story appeals to you? What bit of the story is it that you really like? And the thing with storytelling is that it takes practice and it takes time. I decided to be a storyteller in 2005. And now it's 2021. And I think I'm just getting there now. This is me getting out to the world. So it takes practice and time. Sometimes the story chooses you and you're like, I never would have told that story. But let it happen. Go, oh, that's a really, and you start telling it and bits start coming in and you're adding to it. And sometimes it bursts from you fully formed and you tell it. And when that happens, just the serotonin release is incredible. I mean, Jake and I have just finished doing a commission for Apples and People, and they asked us to do a Norse tale, and I've like not been wary of doing Norse tales, but I'd not told them before, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I do this? So I just started reading the Norse myths, and now I'm so into them that I can't get away from it. It's just amazing. And I really love the stories in them because I've not heard some of them, so they're all new to me. And I'm not just suddenly going to go out there and tell them, but I'm going to work with them, see how they want me to tell them. So basically that I think is all I've got to say, all I've got to share. But if you have any questions, I will throw it open.
Thank you, Suzanne. So if anyone's got any questions, raise your hand or type it in chat. Yeah, so we can all see.
If you haven't, that's fine. Oh, Anne-Marie's got a question.
Yes, typical. Sorry. It's not so much a question, it's just to say to everybody, something we wanted to add on all of these sessions is if you want to add to this, add to it in terms of your story. We've got a Facebook page, which is called COVID After C19. That's
creativity.
Creativity After C19. So it's on Facebook, and we're really encouraging people to add their stories. So in view of what Suzanne's told us about how we can get creative and write our stories, even if it's just a sentence, or if you end up sort of going and writing a novel or just anything, give us a link to it, let us know. The other thing as well, I thought it would be quite good if people have got examples of other stories that people may have already told, particularly relating to this period as we're all coming out of this situation and trying to get creative again. And then just the final thing was, if you hear something, say like on Radio 4 or a podcast or whatever it is, put a link so that we can all share. So let's start trying to share some of these stories around, and people that we think are really good storytellers, it might be good to sort of include them as well, so that again we can listen to different stories. And I know Kath had put a message on chat. What was it you said, Kath?
About joining a Zoom story circle if you want to start practicing telling stories.
Yeah. So that was all I'd got to say. Was it'd be great if you know, if this has inspired you in any way, to put your stories there for us to see. Suzanne's going to be monitoring the Facebook page as well. So if you've got any questions, or you've got stuck, or you know, you need a bit more information relating to this particular one, Suzanne will be able to give you some tips or comments or whatever later on.
We've got a question from Christine, and she wants to know, what do you mean by helpers? How do you use them?
Right, well, going back to the story, the youngest son didn't know that there was a frog down those stairs. So I would say that helpers may come in unexpected forms. A true helper will ask, how can I help you? And then because so often people come in and say, let me help you, and they take over and do stuff. So a true helper will be asking you, how can you help them? So think of things that they would be able to help you with. For example, if they say, what can I do for you? Well, I'd really like it if you could go and fetch me a packet of biscuits. So it's up to you how they help you. Don't be badgered into people coming in and saying, oh, I'll just wash your curtains for you, or because that's what they can do, but it's not necessarily what you want them to do. Oh, I'll come and reorganize your house for you. You don't want it reorganize it. You would say to them, well, it would be great if you could just come in and hoover once a week. That would be fab. That kind of thing. Or from a storytelling perspective, have a look at some of the storytelling authors, but don't buy all the books. Have a look at reviews. Have a look at some people have got videos up now as well, which some of them are really helpful and others not so much. But to the beginner, they may be very useful from a storytelling perspective. But you know, you never know when that little green frog sitting on a golden throne, you might just find it there, and then that will possibly help you. Are there any more questions? Kath?
Suzanne, you mentioned that you have a nature blog, and also I noticed in the story that there were the key elements of the natural objects, the feathers. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on the role of nature and natural elements in healing from trauma.
That's a brilliant question. Yes, they do. During lockdown, the first lockdown, I was watching Chris Packham's daily snippet, and he would go out and do a little film of a plant. That I think one of the first ones was a primrose, and so I kept watching those. And over time he introduced authors and other naturalists, and they would talk about how nature is keeping them going during the lockdown. And you don't have to go outside and stand in a wood, though it is rather wonderful. Our brains are pre-programmed to know that green is good. So if you bring up a picture of a woodland scene on your computer screen, the colours from that will signal to your brain that you are in a good place, because in a forest there is food, there is shelter, and it's the not primal instinct is that in a forest you can survive in a forest. Trees themselves, plants, they give off something called phytoncides as you approach them, which is their messaging system to each other, and they release their hormones which infiltrate us. We breathe them in and they soothe us. They really do calm us down. They have a calming effect on us. Looking at the patterns, for example, I mean, I've got this one, but looking at like leaf patterns like bracken is really satisfying. Our brains like to see this kind of thing. So the natural world is there to help us. It's not an enemy. I mean, the winds the other night, it is part of it, but it is there to help and to keep us going. So if anybody wants any pictures of woodland, sending to them. I have many, because I love taking pictures of woodlands, and get those fractals in your head as well.
Oh.
Thanks, Suzanne. I love the way that you describe standing in a wood as rather wonderful. Just, that is so right. Thanks.
I think I would rather be in a wood than anywhere else on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Any more questions? Alex had put, I thought it was really interesting when you asked people to use the chat to explain what they visualized in the stories. I hadn't really considered that each would be so different. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's like how different people like different types of music, and have people looking at a color card to paint their lounge. It's the same room, but so many people would choose so many different colors. It's brilliant. Now, Anne-Marie, I prefer moorland.
Yeah.
I do like moorland. I do like standing on top of hills and looking down, but I do like my trees. I mean, my garden is kind of almost a woodland. It's not a woodland, but I've planted so many trees there that it, you know, in the summer you can't see the top of it. It's great. Just going for a walk in the woods. And also, like, when we were in lockdown, people said, "Oh, go for a walk in the woods," and blah blah blah. I was like, we have a hedgerow-lined lane, and I got to know each section of it, and within those there were like trees growing, individual trees, all squashed together, but they made this like mini forest, and there were animal tracks going through it, and there were wildflowers growing, and so I didn't have to travel far. I could just go outside and do that. And going into your garden, at my daughter's flat, they've got a tiny patch of grass which they're not allowed to plant anything in. I'm like, you don't need to, look what's here, you know. There was the grass, but there were other plants in there as well. I'm like, well, that's going to flower, and that's going to flower, and so yeah. And anything, even just looking at grass or just looking out the window watching the birds. I joined the BTO, the British Trust for Ornithology, and I do their garden bird watch, and I have feeders outside my window, and I watch the birds, and it's so lovely to see them. And occasionally they give me feathers. I've got this one here, which is a beautiful little goldfinch feather. So things like this make me happy as well. So we're back to feathers. Yes, I have many feathers stuck up here. I've got the different crow feathers here as well, and a magpie feather for Anne-Marie and for Matty. Yes, I like collecting natural things. But yes. So anybody else got anything else they want to say? Okay, that's fine then. Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for everybody for coming and listening, and thank you so much to Mandy and for asking me to do this. That was brilliant. Thank you very much, and also for getting me to think about this and be able to talk about stories. This is my favorite thing. And thank you to Anne-Marie for doing all the technical bits at the beginning and going, it's this one. And thank you to the Arts Council England for funding this project. And yes, hopefully see you on a storytelling Zoom again soon.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. It's been lovely. It really has. Yeah, our next session is next week on the 9th, and that will be Carol, where we'll begin to do some modelling with clay. So you can find that on our Facebook page and click the link to book your place. But I've really enjoyed today, Suzanne. Thank you very much. And I do think it's made everyone think, because my story is a drama. It would be a drama rather than a fairy tale. So, but yeah, it would make me think how to explain it better. Anyone else?
Okay, then should we
No.
should we close then if everyone's okay? Please do carry on joining us with our other sessions. Lots of other artists to come, lots of other different art forms as well. So the idea is if storytelling isn't your thing, it might be that clay is, it might be that writing poetry is, it might be that using felt is. We've got all sorts of things. We've got singing, music coming up. So keep dipping in, and maybe you'll find the art form that'll help you express yourself. See you all. Ta-ta.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.